Have you ever met someone who walked into your life quietly, yet changed everything without even trying? Emma Brooks never imagined that taking a simple job would lead her into a world so different from her own, a world of sharp suits, high expectations, and unspoken rules. There, she met Carter Hayes, a man admired for his success, but trapped by the weight of what others expected him to be. As their worlds intertwined, Emma would face a choice no one prepares you for: to protect her own heart by walking away, or to stay, knowing the cost could be everything. This is a story about love that dares to grow in unlikely places, about courage whispered in moments of doubt, and about finding the strength to be yourself when it matters most. And it all began on a cold winter morning, when Emma stepped through the glass doors of Hawthorne Technologies, unaware that her life was about to change forever. If you find this story touching, comment 1. If you think this video needs improvement, comment 2. It was the most cursed desk in Manhattan. That's what the employees of Hawthorne Technologies whispered when they passed the sleek glass wall outside the CEO's office. The mahogany desk sat perfectly aligned with the hallway, its leather chair pushed in with military precision. It was always empty, not because the company didn't have an executive assistant. They did always, but never for long. "No one lasts more than 21 days with Carter Hayes," whispered a young analyst as she waited for the elevator. 3 weeks, tops. And that's if you're lucky. It wasn't hard to see why. The air on the 57th floor felt different, thinner, tighter. Employees moved as if they were balancing on high wires, clutching tablets and coffee cups like lifelines. Conversation stopped when the elevator dinged. Carter Hayes didn't shout. He didn't need to. One look from him, cool, gray, and utterly unreadable, could strip the confidence from the most seasoned professional. He demanded perfection in everything, every meeting, every email, even the font size on a printed agenda. The position of his assistant, paid more than most mid-level managers, earned in a year. But the cost was sanity. That Thursday morning, Maggie Harper, Hawthorne's head of HR, sat at her desk scrolling through the latest resignation email. Number 12 this year? The words were polite, professional, and just vague enough to hide the truth Carter had worn another assistant down to the bone. She sighed, rubbing her temples. It was barely 8 a.m., but she could already feel the migraine building. The CEO's calendar was a maze of back-to-back meetings, investor calls, and a last-minute product launch briefing. Someone had to fill that desk today. Her phone buzzed a reminder about a candidate list she'd almost ignored. Half the names were crossed out. Most had withdrawn after a single interview. But one name caught her eye. Emma Brooks, Cedar Falls, NY. Applied online last week. Graduated magna cum laude in economics. No big city experience. Small-town girl. No clue what she's walking into, Maggie thought. And yet, something about the handwritten note attached to the application, "I don't run from challenges, I run toward them," made her pause. 200 miles north. The Brooks kitchen smelled faintly of burnt toast and black coffee. Emma sat at the table, elbows on the wood her father had sanded smooth decades ago, a crumpled medical bill in her hands. $14,832.67. The figure might as well have been $1 million. Henry Brooks moved slowly around the kitchen, his work shirt half-buttoned, the collar fraying. "You're not still looking at that bill, are you?" It's hard to ignore when it keeps arriving every month. He set down a plate with 2 fried eggs and a slice of toast that had seen better days. "Your mother would have told you not to worry, said we'd figure it out like we always do." Emma swallowed hard. She's not here to figure it out anymore. Silence settled between them. Outside, The November wind rattled the last leaves in the maple trees lining their street. Her phone buzzed. Unknown New York number. She almost ignored it, probably a telemarketer, but something in her gut told her to answer. This is Emma. Emma, this is Maggie Harper from Hawthorne Technologies in New York City. Your resume came across my desk this morning. We're looking for an executive assistant to our CEO, starting immediately. Emma blinked. I didn't think you'd actually call. I applied, but can you be in Manhattan tomorrow morning? She glanced at the unpaid bills stacked near the coffee maker. Her heartbeat quickened. I can. Good. Be here at 9 sharp. Bring a printed resume. And a thick skin. The call ended. Henry raised an eyebrow. What was that about Emma folded the paper in her hands? It might be a chance. A big one. But I've heard stories about the guy. Stories that no one lasts more than 3 weeks working for him. She pushed the eggs around her plate. Sounds like exactly the kind of challenge Mom would have told me to take. Henry studied her for a long moment. You've got her grit. Just don't let him take it from you. The next morning, the city swallowed her whole. By the time she reached the Hawthorne Technologies Tower, her scarf was damp from a cold drizzle. The glass facade reflected the steel gray sky, making the building seem even taller. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed, the scent of fresh coffee mixing with the faint hum of expensive cologne. The receptionist's smile was perfect but perfunctory. Name Emma Brooks. I have an interview with Maggie Harper. Elevator to 57. The ride up felt like ascending into another world. Each floor ticked by in gold lettering until the doors opened to silence. And there it was, the infamous empty desk, not a paper out of place. Maggie appeared from the corridor, her stride brisk. Emma Good. Come on, the CEO will see you now. The CEO. I thought no point in wasting time. If you're going to last here, you'll meet him sooner or later. Might as well be now. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. She followed Maggie past glass-walled conference rooms, catching glimpses of suits and laptops. At the end of the hall, Maggie opened a door to an office that could have been in a magazine spread floor-to-ceiling windows, a walnut desk, and behind it, Carter Hayes. He didn't look up right away, just signed something with a Mont Blanc pen, then glanced at her. His eyes were exactly as described, cool, assessing, impossible to read. Then, fate intervened. Emma's bag strap slipped off her shoulder. The coffee she'd grabbed downstairs tipped inside the tote. She yanked it upright, but too late a thin brown stream trickled across the edge of the desk toward a neat stack of printed documents. Carter's hand froze. The room seemed to shrink. Emma blurted, "I can fix this," and reached for the papers. He stopped her with a look. "You're applying for a job, and your opening move is to baptize my contract in espresso." Her cheeks burned, but instead of stammering an apology, she heard herself say, "If I can clean this up faster than I made the mess, you should hire me. If not, I'll walk out and you'll never see me again." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, curiosity. Maybe. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Go ahead, Miss Brooks. Impress me." And that was how Emma Brooks, from a town where everyone knew your middle name and your business, found herself facing the most feared man in Manhattan, with nothing but a stack of damp papers and her own stubborn resolve. In the high-glass world of Hawthorne Technologies, first impressions could crown you, or crush you before the coffee even cooled. Emma's fingers still tingled from the weight of Carter Hayes's gaze. She'd cleaned the coffee spill with the precision of someone who'd mopped diner counters for tips in high school, careful not to smudge the ink on the top pages. When she straightened, Carter was watching her not with approval, but with the calculating interest of a man deciding if a stock was worth buying. "Sit," he said simply, gesturing to the chair across from him. The leather was cold against her palms as she settled in. A part of her wanted to shrink under that gaze, but another part, the one that had gotten her through unpaid bills, broken-down cars, and the night her mother took her last breath, kept her chin level. He flipped open her resume. Cedar Falls. Population. What, 4,200, she said, and shrinking. A corner of his mouth almost moved, then didn't. Why apply here? You've never worked in a city. You've never supported a C-suite executive. Emma clasped her hands to keep from fidgeting. I've run 3 different jobs at once. Managed accounts for a bank branch that survived a merger because I negotiated with the new owners. And I've balanced my father's garage books down to the penny for 10 years. I may not know your world yet, Mr. Hayes, but I know how to keep one from falling apart. Maggie, standing by the door, raised an eyebrow. It was more than most applicants managed under Carter's interrogation. He closed the folder. You start Monday. 7:15 sharp. Emma blinked. That's it. He picked up his pen again, dismissing her with the smallest tilt of his head. Back in the elevator, Maggie studied her. You have any idea what you just signed up for? I think so. No, you don't, Maggie said, but there was the faintest smile on her face. Bring running shoes, metaphorically speaking. That evening, Emma called her father from a street corner in Midtown, the cold wind whipping her hair across her cheek. They hired me, she said. Henry's voice was warm but cautious. Proud of you, Em. Just remember who you are. That place sounds like it could swallow a person whole. Emma glanced up at the lit tower she'd be walking into on Monday. The glass reflected her own faint silhouette small, but still standing. I won't forget, she said, but as the cabs roared past and the city pulsed around her, she wondered if you could work for a man like Carter Hayes without leaving some part of yourself behind. Monday morning arrived before she felt ready. The 57th floor was hushed at dawn, the city still shaking off its weekend. Emma placed her bag in the desk's single drawer, lined up her notepads, and took a steadying breath. Carter walked in at 7:30 on the dot, wearing a charcoal suit that fit like it had been designed for him because it probably had. Without breaking stride, he handed her a list. Confirm the investor lunch, move the quarterly review to next week, and call Reynolds in Chicago. Tell him I'm not interested in excuses, just results. It wasn't a greeting, but Emma wrote each task in neat bullet points. Anything else? He paused. Not yet. By 10, She'd navigated a scheduling software she'd never seen before, smoothed over an irritated client, and located a missing file that turned out to be misnamed on the shared drive. Each time she completed a task, Carter barely looked up yet. She caught the flicker in his expression, like he was keeping score. At noon, Maggie passed by and murmured, Still here. That's a start. Emma smiled faintly, but her hands ached from typing, and the knot in her shoulders was growing tighter. By 4 o'clock, a courier delivered a thick envelope marked Confidential. Emma buzzed Carter's office. Bring it in. He took the folder, scanning the first page, then stopped. This is missing the revised projections. That's all they sent, she said. Call them. Tell them I expect the complete packet in the next 30 minutes. If they can't manage that, we'll find someone who can. Emma hesitated. It's already past business hours in their time zone. His eyes lifted to hers, cool and unblinking. So, find a way around it. Her pulse thudded. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about how far she was willing to go to meet impossible standards. She picked up the phone. 28 minutes later, the missing documents hit her inbox. She printed them, stacked them perfectly, and placed them on his desk without a word. Carter's hand stilled on his keyboard. Noted. When she finally stepped out into the street that evening, the air was sharp with the smell of roasted chestnuts from a corner cart. Her feet ached, her head pounded, but there was a strange satisfaction in knowing she'd made it through day one. What she didn't know, what no one had warned her, was that Carter Hayes never played the same game 2 days in a row. In Carter Hayes's world, yesterday's win was forgotten by sunrise, and Emma was about to find out how fast the rules could change. By her third morning, Emma had learned that a quiet office was never a good sign. It meant Carter was thinking. And when Carter thought, someone's day was about to get harder. She arrived at 7:14, slid her bag into the drawer, and poured herself a glass of water from the cooler. The city outside was still wrapped in its pale winter light. She barely had time to check her emails before Carter appeared, coat draped over one arm, holding a coffee Emma hadn't fetched. He placed it on her desk without looking up. "Schedule a product team meeting for noon. Bring the mock-up revisions, and I'll need you to sit in." She blinked. In the meeting. "Yes," he said, already walking toward his office. "If you're going to keep this job, you need to learn the stakes." The conference room felt more like a battlefield than a place for discussion. Engineers shuffled their notes. Marketing leads whispered to each other. Carter stood at the head of the table, eyes scanning the mock-ups as if they were puzzles with pieces deliberately missing. Emma sat at the side, notebook open. She'd taken shorthand in college, but hadn't expected to use it here. Carter began dissecting the presentation, point by point, flaw by flaw. When he asked a question, the room tensed. Halfway through, a junior designer suggested a change that contradicted Carter's earlier direction. The air turned electric. Carter's voice dropped, calm but sharp. "Did you read the market research?" The young man swallowed. "I skimmed it." Carter turned to Emma. "Summarize it. Now." She froze for half a second, then flipped open the report she'd reviewed that morning. Target demographic, mid-30s to early 50s, preference for minimal design, high durability, and integrated tech features. Revisions should reduce unnecessary ornamentation and focus on function without losing visual appeal. The room went silent. Carter's gaze held hers for a beat. Then he nodded once. Exactly. Something shifted in that moment. Not approval. Exactly, but acknowledgement. By the time the meeting ended, Emma's hand cramped from note-taking, but she felt a strange sense of pride. She'd kept pace. During lunch, Maggie appeared at her desk with 2 salads in takeout boxes. "You'll starve if you wait for him to tell you to eat." Emma smiled gratefully. "Does he ever slow down?" Maggie gave a dry laugh. "Only when he's asleep. And even then, I'm not sure." The afternoon brought a different kind of challenge fielding calls from 3 major investors, all with competing demands. One wanted earlier delivery dates. Another pushed for expanded features. The third hinted they might pull funding if targets weren't met. Emma relayed each message to Carter, expecting him to take over. Instead, he leaned back in his chair. "What would you tell them?" She hesitated. "I'd acknowledge their concerns, confirm the value they've already committed to, and offer a timeline update that's realistic but optimistic. And I'd promise a progress report by Friday." Carter studied her for a long moment, then handed her the phone. "Do it." Her pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. By the end of the calls, 2 investors had agreed to hold steady, and one had even complimented her professionalism. She set the phone down, adrenaline still humming in her veins. "Not bad," Carter said, almost to himself. That evening, as the office emptied and the city's lights began to glow, Emma lingered to finish typing the meeting notes. The hum of the building's heating system filled the silence. She noticed Carter at his desk, staring at a photo frame partially turned away from view. He caught her glance and rotated it fully, revealing a city skyline, not New York, but Los Angeles at sunset. "Ever been there?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." "Looks beautiful, though." "It was," he said quietly. And for a moment, something softer edged his voice. Then the phone on his desk rang, and the moment vanished. Emma left the building into a swirl of cold air, her scarf pulled tight. She thought about the pace, the constant demands, and the brief glimpse of something human behind Carter's armor. Somehow, she knew tomorrow would bring something different again, maybe harder, maybe stranger. And though her feet ached and her mind buzzed, she felt ready. What she didn't know was that the next test wouldn't come from Carter, but from someone who knew exactly how to push his buttons. The warning from yesterday was right. Some storms don't start with thunder. They arrive in emerald coats and high heels, bringing the past into the present. It was barely past 9 on Wednesday when the elevator doors slid open, and the air on the 57th floor shifted in a way Emma couldn't quite name. She sat at her desk, sorting through Carter's morning brief, when the sudden hush in the hallway caught her attention. The low hum of conversation from the design team faded. Even the sound of typing seemed to stop. The woman who stepped out of the elevator looked like she'd been poured into her deep emerald coat. Tall, poised, her chestnut hair twisted into a perfect knot. She moved with the kind of unhurried confidence that made others step aside without being asked. The sharp rhythm of her heels on the marble floor echoed down the corridor, each click like a countdown. She came straight for Emma's desk. "Can I help you?" Emma asked, standing before she even realized she'd moved. The woman's smile was pleasant but precise, the kind that felt practiced in front of cameras. "You must be Emma Brooks." "I am," Emma said slowly. "And you are Madeline Price." She slipped off one glove, offering her hand. "Carter's fiancée." "Former fiancée. Technically. But labels." She tilted her head slightly. "Can be so temporary. Don't you think the name landed with weight?" Emma had heard it before in break-room whispers, in the lowered voices of 2 marketing assistants who'd once passed Carter and Madeline walking arm in arm in Paris. The daughter of a media magnate, the woman who had almost married Carter Hayes. Emma shook her hand, firm but brief. "Is Mr. Hayes expecting you?" "Not exactly," Madeline said, glancing past Emma toward the frosted glass door of Carter's office. "But Carter never minds when I drop in. We go back a long way." She looked back at Emma, letting the silence stretch just a little too long. "I imagine you've learned that already." Emma's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. "I'll let him know you're here." Before she could reach for the phone, Carter's office door opened. He stepped out in a navy suit, the lines of his face set in neutral control except for the brief flicker when he saw Madeline. "Madeline," he said, his voice flat enough to frost the air. "You should have called and missed the look on your face." Her laugh was soft, deliberate. "We need to talk." Without waiting for an answer, she walked past him into his office as if she'd never lost the right. Carter glanced once at Emma, something unreadable in his eyes, then followed, closing the door with a quiet finality. The next hour stretched like cold molasses. Emma tried to focus on her emails, but the muffled rise and fall of voices seeped through the wall. Sometimes the tones were low, almost intimate, Other times sharp enough that she paused mid-typing. At one point, she thought she heard Madeline's laughter, warm but edged. At 10:23, the door opened. Madeline emerged first, coat draped over her arm, not a single hair out of place. She paused at Emma's desk, her eyes taking in every detail: Emma's neatly stacked papers, the worn leather planner beside her keyboard, the coffee cup with a faint lipstick mark. "You have a lovely smile," Madeline said, as if delivering a compliment. "Don't lose it. In this business, it's the first thing people take from you." Emma met her gaze. "Thanks for the advice." Madeline's lips curved just a fraction more before she turned and glided toward the elevator. Carter stood in his doorway, one hand braced against the frame.
"Hold my calls for the next 30 minutes. His voice was calm, almost too calm, but the muscle in his jaw ticked. He stepped back into his office, the door closing with a quiet click. Emma sat for a moment, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The words Madeline had used weren't threatening. Not exactly, but they felt like a velvet glove hiding something sharper. Maggie appeared at her side around lunch, setting down a container of soup. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "More like a storm in a designer coat," Emma murmured. Maggie's eyebrows climbed. "She came here. That's unusual. Unusual how Madeline doesn't waste her time unless she wants something," Maggie said, peeling the lid off her own lunch. "And she usually gets it." That evening, the office had emptied into the hum of the city's rush hour. Emma lingered, finishing Carter's schedule for the rest of the week. Through the glass, she saw him at his desk, staring at the framed photo of Los Angeles again. She tapped lightly on his door. "Do you need anything before I head out for a moment?" He just looked at her. The question in his eyes was almost there, but he swallowed it back. "No. Good night, Emma." Outside, the wind cut down the avenues, cold enough to sting her cheeks. She stopped at a corner cart, buying a paper cup of hot cider. The steam curled into the night air as she walked toward the subway, the city lights stretching ahead like a glittering maze. On the ride home, she texted her father, "Busy day. Tell you tomorrow." She didn't have the words yet, not for him, not even for herself. One thing was clear: Madeline Price hadn't just visited. She'd staked a claim. And if Emma wasn't careful, she'd be standing directly in the crossfire. After Madeline's storm, some conversations wouldn't just change the air, they'd decide the course of what came next. Thursday morning began with the usual rhythm: emails, coffee, a list of demands from Carter delivered in his precise handwriting. But there was a subtle difference. He was quieter. Not the clipped, dismissive quiet she'd seen on her first day, but a more deliberate kind, as if he was measuring every word before letting it out. By mid-morning, she noticed him standing by the window, phone in hand, unmoving for a full minute. When he finally spoke, it was to her. "Emma, cancel my 5:30 call with Toronto. Move it to Monday." She made a note. "Done. Anything else?" "Yes." His gaze shifted from the skyline to her. "Clear your evening." Emma paused. "For dinner." The word landed between them with more weight than it should have. Blue Harbor Cafe wasn't far from the office, but it was a world away from the glass and steel formality of Hawthorne Technologies. The air was warm with the smell of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon, the lighting soft enough to make the city outside feel distant. Emma arrived first, unsure if she should have dressed differently. She'd kept on her work clothes but added a scarf she liked, one her mother had given her years ago. Carter walked in exactly on time. Not a suit tonight. Dark trousers, a navy sweater, and a coat still dusted with the faintest trace of snow. They ordered coffee, then sat in a corner booth.
For a while, the conversation was light a story about a delivery mishap that had left the office without toner for a full day. A brief laugh over an email typo that had turned strategic alignment into strategic alightment. But eventually, Carter's tone shifted. About yesterday. Emma set her cup down. Madeline. He nodded. She came to talk about the past and the future she thinks we should have. Emma waited. I told her that chapter was closed, he said.
But she's not someone who accepts closed doors. She's used to walking through them. Emma studied his face. And what do you think his gaze didn't waver? I think people from my past underestimate how much I've changed, or how much I want to. The hum of the cafe filled the pause. Outside, a bus rumbled past, its headlights streaking the window glass. I asked you here, Carter continued, because I don't want yesterday's visit to make you doubt where you stand. Emma's heart caught on the phrasing. And where is that for the first time all day? He smiled, not the polite, closed-lip one she'd seen in meetings, but something warmer, closer than most people get. They spoke until the cafe began stacking chairs. He walked her toward the subway entrance, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. At the top of the stairs, he stopped. I know this job demands more than most people are willing to give, he said, and I know I'm not the easiest person to work for. But you've handled it better than anyone I've ever met. She felt the cold bite at her cheeks, the scent of his cologne mixing with the city air. Are you thanking me, Mr. Hayes? Maybe, he said, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Don't let it go to your head. They parted there, the city swallowing them in opposite directions, but as Emma rode the train home, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Later that night, in her small apartment, she called her father. "How's the big city treating you today?" Henry asked. Emma smiled faintly, curling up on the couch. "It's complicated, but I think I'm starting to understand how it works." "Complicated's not always bad." Henry said, "It means you're in the middle of something that matters." She thought about the cafe, about the way Carter had looked across the table, steady and intent. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think you're right." Back in Manhattan, Carter stood at his apartment window, looking out over the frozen park. His phone buzzed with a message from Alex Reed. "Madeline's been asking questions again. Thought you should know." He didn't reply. Instead, he set the phone down and poured himself a glass of water, the reflection of the city lights rippling in the surface. Somewhere between Madeline's visit and that cafe booth, a choice had started forming in his mind. But choices, he knew, had consequences, and he wasn't sure yet if he was ready to face them. After the cafe, Emma thought the air had cleared, but some pressure doesn't come from work. It comes from people convinced they own your future. Monday morning dawned gray and brittle, the kind of cold that made even Manhattan's sidewalk seem to flinch. Emma arrived early, wrapping her scarf tighter as she stepped into the lobby. By 7:10, she was at her desk, flipping through Carter's schedule. That's when she saw it, an unscheduled meeting at 11 a.m. with MP. The initials didn't need explaining. At exactly 10:59, Madeline Price stepped off the elevator. This time, she didn't wear a coat. Instead, a fitted charcoal dress and pearls at her throat. She moved past Emma with a polite nod, as if they'd already reached some unspoken understanding. Carter's door closed behind her, and the conversation began. It was quieter than last time, but somehow heavier. Emma busied herself with calls and emails, yet her eyes kept straying to the frosted glass. She imagined the topics: business alliances,
charity events, perhaps a suggestion that Hawthorne Technologies could benefit from stability at the top. At 11:42, the door opened. Madeline emerged with a soft smile, not at Emma, but to herself. Carter followed a few moments later, his expression unreadable. "Clear my afternoon," he said. "I need to think. By lunch." The office was buzzing. Maggie stopped by Emma's desk, voice low. "Word is Madeline's been talking to the board." "You okay?" Emma nodded, though her stomach had tightened since morning. "I'm fine." But the truth was more complicated. She had never seen herself as part of the corporate chessboard. Yet now she could feel the pieces shifting around her. That evening, Carter asked her to stay late, at 7 p.m. The office was nearly empty except for the low hum of the HVAC and the glow of the city outside. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "You should know. Madeline's father controls a significant portion of our media exposure. The board thinks rekindling that connection would be advantageous." Emma met his gaze. "And what do you think I think I've spent too many years letting other people decide what's advantageous for me?" he said quietly. "But the pressure is real. They're already questioning some of my decisions." The air between them felt dense. Emma wanted to tell him she didn't care about board politics, that she only cared about whether he meant what he'd said in the cafe. But she knew that, in Carter's world, caring wasn't always enough. On her way home, Emma stopped at a small grocery near her apartment. The smell of fresh bread and the low murmur of other shoppers grounded her in something simple. She picked up a carton of milk, some apples, and a jar of her mother's favorite raspberry jam. At the checkout, she realized she'd been holding her breath for most of the day. The cashier, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, smiled and said, "Honey, whatever it is, it's not worth losing your peace over." Emma smiled faintly. "Maybe. But sometimes peace feels like a luxury." Across town, Carter sat in his apartment, the skyline spread out beyond his window. Alex Reed's voice echoed from their call earlier. "You can't keep both worlds, Carter. Eventually, one will push the other out." Carter set down his glass of water. The truth was, he wasn't sure which world he wanted to keep or which one he was willing to lose. After the board's whispers, Emma knew some truths don't shatter all at once, they crack, until one day you see just how fragile everything has become. By midweek, the tension on the 57th floor had settled into something quieter, more dangerous, like a storm moving offshore, waiting for the right moment to come back. Emma kept her head down, answering calls, double-checking schedules, moving through each task with precision. Yet she could feel it, eyes on her, conversations stopping just a fraction too quickly when she entered a room. At lunch, Maggie joined her in the break room, setting down 2 cups of coffee. "The board meets Friday," she said quietly. "You didn't hear it from me, but Madeline will be there." Emma stirred her coffee, watching the cream swirl. And that means she's not done." Maggie's voice held the kind of warning that came from experience. Just be ready for anything. That afternoon, Carter called her into his office. He was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the frozen city. "We have a dinner Friday night, a client from Boston. I need you there." Emma hesitated. "Is this business or business?" he said, too quickly. Then, softer, "But I'd rather not go alone." She met his gaze. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of exhaustion, or maybe resolve, but she couldn't tell which. "All right," she said, "I'll be there." Friday came fast. The day was a blur of last-minute calls and document reviews. At 3 p.m., Maggie stopped by Emma's desk. "The board meeting's running long," she said. Whatever happens in there, keep your plans for tonight." At 4:45, the boardroom doors opened. Carter emerged, his expression unreadable, with Madeline a step behind. They spoke briefly before she turned away, her smile cool and composed. Carter walked straight to his office without a word. That evening, Emma met him in the lobby. He was in a charcoal suit, the same one he'd worn at the investor gala, and for a moment she remembered seeing him across a crowded room. Untouchable. The dinner was at a private room in a midtown restaurant. Crystal glasses, linen napkins, the low hum of conversation from the main dining room beyond. Carter handled the meeting with practiced ease, but Emma noticed the way he glanced at her when the client spoke, as if grounding himself. Halfway through dessert, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening. "Excuse me," he said, stepping outside. When he returned, the smile was gone. The client thanked them both, promising to finalize the contract Monday. On the walk out, Emma asked, "Bad news, Madeline," he said. "She wants to meet tomorrow. Says it's important." Back at her apartment, Emma sat on the couch with the lights off, the city flickering through the window. She thought about the look on his face after that call. Not anger, not quite dread, but the weight of someone bracing for a blow. Her phone buzzed, a text from her father Weathers turning here. "Drive safe if you come up this weekend." She typed back, "Might have to stay in the city. Things are complicated." Then she set the phone down, the word hanging in the quiet like an echo. Somewhere across town, Carter stood at his own window, the glass reflecting a man caught between two futures. And tomorrow, he'd have to choose which one to step toward. After the board's whispers, Emma knew some truths don't shatter all at once, they crack, until one day you see just how fragile everything has become. And Saturday might be the day hers broke for good. Saturday morning was unseasonably warm for January, the kind of day when Manhattan almost fooled you into believing winter had eased its grip. But the sunlight through Emma's kitchen window felt sharp, not soft. She brewed coffee in the small French press her father had given her before she moved to the city. The rich aroma filled the room, but when she poured it into her favorite mug, her hands lingered around the ceramic, not drinking, just holding on. At 9:12, her phone buzzed. A message from Carter, meeting Madeline at 11. "I'll call you after." She stared at the words longer than necessary, then set the phone face down on the counter. By the time she took a sip, the coffee had gone lukewarm. Carter arrived at the Langford Hotel right on time. The lobby cafe was bright with polished brass fixtures, every table neatly set. Madeline sat in the corner, perfectly composed, her pearl earrings catching the light. "You came," she said, as if there had been a question. "You said it was important." "It is." She gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit." He did. Madeline didn't waste time. "The board is restless. Investors, too. They think your attachment to your assistant is clouding your judgment." Carter's jaw tightened. Emma is not a distraction. Madeline's smile was the kind that could pass for pleasant until you looked too closely. "She's a liability, Carter. Not because of who she is, but because of what she isn't. She's not from our world. She doesn't understand the rules, and frankly, she doesn't want to. That's dangerous for you, for the company, for everything you've built." "This isn't about the company," he said evenly. Her eyes glittered. "Of course it's not. I don't like losing. And right now, you're giving me the impression that I'm losing to someone who doesn't even know she's playing the game." He leaned forward. "If you think this is a game, you've already lost me." Madeline tilted her head, unshaken. You're smart enough to know love and loyalty don't pay dividends. You've worked too hard to let it all crumble because of one woman who, let's be honest, will never fit at your table.
Carter's voice was low, deliberate. That one woman is the only person in months who's had the courage to tell me the truth, whether I wanted to hear it or not. Madeline's lips curved just enough to show she'd scored a small point of her own. Truth is a luxury, Carter. And in our world, luxuries get cut when the numbers don't work. While they spoke, Emma was at the farmer's market, a canvas bag over her arm. She bought a loaf of sourdough, lingered at a honey stand, and tried to convince herself she was enjoying the morning. But each time her phone vibrated, her chest tightened. By the time Carter left the Langford, the conversation had ended without resolution, just the kind of uneasy truce that promised more battles ahead. At noon, Emma set the bread and honey on her kitchen counter, untouched. She sat on the couch with a book open in her lap, but found herself reading the same paragraph 3 times. Her phone buzzed. "Carter, can I come by?" When he arrived. There was no suit, no armor, just jeans, a dark sweater, and eyes that seemed older than the day before. "She wants me back," he said simply. Emma didn't move, just waited. "She says it's about what's best for the company. The board would love it. Investors would, too." "And you?" she asked. His answer was quiet but certain. "I told her no, but she's not done. She's going to make this as hard as possible." Emma crossed to the kitchen, poured 2 mugs of coffee. "You knew this was coming the day she walked into your office," she said gently. "I thought I could handle it." "You can," she said, setting his mug in front of him. "But not if you keep trying to live in both worlds." He looked at her then, as if measuring not just her words, but the weight she carried in saying them. Outside, the January light was already fading, the warmth of the morning slipping back toward cold. Inside, the air felt like it was holding its breath. Neither of them knew exactly what tomorrow would bring, only that it would demand a choice neither could postpone much longer. Some moments aren't planned. They arrive like a tide, and all you can do is decide whether to step back or stand your ground. Monday morning began with the kind of winter sky that looked painted clear, cold, endless blue. Emma arrived early, her heels echoing on the marble of the 57th floor. The office was still, only the hum of the heating system breaking the silence. By 8:15, the first wave of staff had trickled in. Maggie stopped by Emma's desk, leaning in. "The board meeting's been moved up to 10. Everyone's on edge." Emma nodded, though her pulse quickened. She knew Madeline would be there. At 9:52, Carter emerged from his office. He was in a dark navy suit, tie perfectly knotted, but his eyes carried the sharp focus of someone who had already made a decision. "Emma," he said, "I need you in the boardroom." She blinked. "Me? Yes." His voice left no room for argument. "You'll be taking notes. And I want you to hear what's said." The boardroom was a long oval table beneath a chandelier that spilled warm light over polished wood. The air smelled faintly of leather and coffee. Madeline was already seated near the head, greeting each member with practiced ease. When Carter walked in, the room quieted. He took his place at the head of the table, Emma at his right. The meeting began with the usual updates, quarterly reports, projections. Then came the shift. A senior board member cleared his throat. "We've been hearing concerns from investors about stability at the executive level. Perception matters. Carter." Another member chimed in. "Madeline has long-standing relationships in this industry. Her return could strengthen our position." Emma kept her pen moving, though her hand trembled slightly. Carter let the voices finish before speaking.
I appreciate the concern. Stability is important. But it's not built on appearances. It's built on performance and trust. He glanced briefly at Emma before turning back to the table. I've made my decision. My personal life will not be dictated by corporate strategy, and my professional decisions will continue to be based on what's best for Hawthorne, not on public optics. Madeline's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed just enough for Emma to notice. Carter continued, We have record growth this quarter, a strong client pipeline, and a team delivering beyond expectations. That's stability. That's the story we should be telling investors. The room was silent for a beat too long. Then Alex, seated midway down the table, spoke up. I back Carter's position. Performance speaks louder than perception. It wasn't a victory cheer, but it was a lifeline. The meeting moved on, but Emma could feel the undercurrent. Lines had been drawn, even if no one said it out loud. Afterward, in the hallway, Carter stopped. I wanted them to see you there, he said quietly. Not because you're my assistant, but because you're part of what makes this company stronger. Emma met his gaze. That was a risk. He gave a faint smile. Some things are worth the risk. By late afternoon, word had spread. Some colleagues passed Emma with nods of quiet support, others with wary glances. At 5, she packed her bag, stepping into the elevator just as her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, careful who you stand beside. Not everyone plays fair. She didn't need a signature to know who had sent it. Emma looked at the screen until the elevator doors opened onto the lobby. The message wasn't a surprise, but it was a reminder. This wasn't over, and the next move might not be hers to make. Some storms you see coming from miles away. Others arrive in a single phone call. Tuesday morning. Emma was halfway through Carter's calendar when his office phone rang. She answered, expecting a client, or maybe Alex.
Instead, a clipped voice said, This is Detective Rowe, NYPD. I need to speak with Mr. Hayes. It's urgent. Her pen froze mid-sentence. One moment. She stepped into Carter's office, closing the door behind her. There's a Detective Rowe on the line. Says it's urgent. Carter's brow furrowed as he picked up. Emma waited by the door, hearing only fragments. Yes. When... I understand. When he hung up, his face was set in that unreadable way she'd seen before, except this time there was a flicker of something else. Madeline's in the hospital, he said finally. Car accident last night. Emma felt the air shift. Is she... She'll live. Broken arm. Concussion. But she told the police she thinks her brakes were tampered with. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of it settled between them. By mid-morning, the office was buzzing. Someone had already spotted the news on a local site socialite and business executive injured in Midtown collision. Maggie appeared at Emma's desk. If this is true, it's going to get ugly. The board will close ranks around her. Emma nodded, but her mind was on the look Carter had given her, half concern, half calculation. At lunch, Carter called her into his office again. I'm going to the hospital. She asked to see me. Emma hesitated. Do you think that's wise? No, he admitted. But if she really thinks someone's targeting her, I need to hear what she has to say. The hospital room was bright and sterile, the sound of a heart monitor steady in the background. Madeline looked pale but composed, her left arm in a sling. You came, she said, as though she'd been expecting him all along. You asked, he replied. She studied him for a moment before speaking. I don't know who did it, but the mechanic said the brake line was cut. That's not an accident. Carter. He stayed silent.
I'm not naive enough to think this city is free of enemies. She continued. But lately, I've been wondering if some of mine might be closer than I thought. Back at the office, Emma tried to focus on a vendor contract but kept replaying those words. Closer than I thought. Was it just Madeline's way of stirring suspicion, or did she actually believe someone inside their world wanted her gone? At 4:37, an email popped up in her inbox from an unknown address. You're in deeper than you realize. Walk away while you still can. She stared at it until the words blurred, her heart pounding. That evening, Carter stopped by her desk as she was packing up. We need to talk, he said quietly. Not here. Outside. The winter air was sharp enough to sting. They walked 2 blocks to a small park, mostly empty except for a couple walking a dog. She told me something today. Carter began. Said the board's been more divided than they're letting on. If she's right, someone could be using this accident to force changes at the top. Emma pulled her coat tighter. Changes like replacing you. He met her eyes. Or making me so desperate for stability, I'll do whatever they want. The lamplight caught in his gaze, and for the first time, she saw the outline of fear there, not for himself, but for the people caught in the crossfire. Emma, he said, voice low, this isn't just about us anymore, and if you stay close to me, you might become a target too. She thought of the text, the email, Madeline's broken arm, and for the first time, she wondered if love and loyalty were enough against a game this dangerous. In life, we are often told to choose the path that makes sense, the one that is safe, expected, and approved by others. Yet, as Emma's journey reminds us, what looks right on paper may not be what feels right in the heart. True stability comes not from pleasing everyone, but from standing firmly in who we are and what we value. Carter's struggle reflects a truth many discover late in life. Success without personal fulfillment can feel empty. It takes courage to turn away from long-standing expectations, especially when those around us resist change. But the cost of ignoring our own truth is far greater. This story also speaks to loyalty, not blind loyalty, but the kind that comes from seeing someone's worth when others overlook it. It reminds us that relationships, whether in love or work, are strongest when built on respect, honesty, and shared courage. For those in their later years, it is a gentle nudge. It is never too late to choose differently, to stand up for love, or to protect the peace you've earned. Because in the end, the life you live should be the one you can look back on with no regrets. Thank you so much for spending your time with this story. If it touched your heart, I'd be truly grateful if you could like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapter. Your support means the world, and it's what keeps these stories alive. Together, let's keep sharing warmth, hope, and inspiration.